On this episode of the CyberWatch podcast, billions and billions of records are liberated from their rightful owners, some vulnerabilities are oldies and baddies, and 'tis the season for new malware campaigns. All this today in CyberWatch. Hello, and welcome to the CyberWatch podcast for the week of December 8th, 2024. This is your weekly roundup of the top cybersecurity news and analysis curated by the analysts at Access Point Consulting. I'm your host, Curtis Franklin. Let's get to the news. We begin this week's news with a series of reports looking at recently disclosed intrusions, data thefts, and ransomware attacks. In the first, Black Basta ransomware operators appear to have improved their tactics, using Microsoft Teams to drop Zbot, Darkgate, and custom malware on victim systems. The attacks start as a social engineering campaign in which a threat actor floods a user's inbox with hundreds of junk messages, then contacts the victim to offer assistance. If the very frustrated victim bites, the threat actor will install or run a remote management program like Quick Assist, AnyDesk, TeamViewer, Level, or Screen Connect, and at that point, it's game over. The campaign focuses on obtaining user credentials that can then be used to gain access to business systems across the enterprise. Analysts say that limiting users' ability to use Teams to communicate with individuals outside the organization is a key to defending against this sort of attack, though user education and standardizing on VPN access will each play a role in upping the organization's defensive posture. Next comes news of a malicious campaign that has had the extraordinary impact of causing national law enforcement and security agencies to change a long-standing recommendation. According to the White House, a Chinese government-backed malicious group known as Typhoon has been successfully attacking global telecommunications companies for at least the last 2 years. The deep and persistent level of the intrusions has led the FBI and CISA to recommend that all computer users switch communications to encrypted services like Telegram, Signal, or in WhatsApp to avoid data theft. The agencies say that at least 8 U.S. telecommunications companies have been breached and that the intrusions have been active for several months, up to 2 years. While the public is assured that no classified information seems to have been stolen, the same assurance can't be given for personal data. Experts suggest that users follow the agency's advice and encrypt all communications, especially communication involving personal or financial information, beginning immediately. Given that the agencies have spent years urging that strong encryption be kept away from the public because of the criminal use danger, this indicates a serious degree of concern about the possible security implications of this advanced, persistent intrusion. While Typhoon has a very broad reach, our next story is about a threat with a much tighter focus. Pegasus, spyware from Israel's NSO group that hits targeted iOS and Android mobile devices, has been found to be far more prevalent than previously thought. The spyware has been used in campaigns that target journalists, politicians, human rights advocates, and other persons of interest to government intelligence agencies, though journalists seem to be the primary targets of the malicious activity. Pegasus allows the controller to exploit OS vulnerabilities and leverage zero-click attacks to access and extract any information they choose from an exploited mobile device. Attackers can intercept and transmit messages, emails, media files, passwords, and detailed location information without a user's knowledge or interaction. Because the initial loaders for malware, such as Pegasus, tend to attack unpatched vulnerabilities, analysts suggest keeping systems up to date with the latest operating system software, training users to recognize phishing messages, and using anti-malware programs to reduce the chance of successful intrusions. Speaking of successful intrusions, hundreds of thousands of employees from companies including Xerox, Nokia, Coke, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley have had personal information stolen and dumped on the dark web. These employees are the latest victims of a supply chain attack from 2023 that used the file transfer tool MoveIt to breach security at scores of companies and exfiltrate critical personal information. Analysts say that in this era of massive attacks, encryption is the surest form of defense, though no company should ignore the benefits of training employees and using best practices, including multi-factor authentication, rigorous software updating, network segmentation, and network monitoring to add layers of defense. Updating will be especially important to combat one new and one rather old vulnerability that made the news this week. The first is a Windows 0 day that allows attackers to capture NTLM credentials by simply tricking the target into viewing a malicious file in Windows Explorer. According to the OPatch researchers who discovered the vulnerability, the issue, which does not yet have a CVE ID, impacts all Windows versions from Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2 up to the latest Windows 11 24H2 and Server 22. Now, the researchers haven't released details of the vulnerability or exploit, but they do say that the attack works by simply viewing a specially crafted malicious file in File Explorer, so actually opening the file isn't required. As of today, Microsoft has not patched the vulnerability, though OPatch has released what it calls a micropatch to its customers to fix the problem until Microsoft acts. Analysts say that locking files to read only when they're shared on shared drives or being brought in from outside the organization can serve as a workaround until a formal patch is issued. And in the patches only work if they're applied category, we have Cisco warning customers about new exploitation of a vulnerability with a CVE date of 2014. The vulnerability is a cross-site scripting issue for the WebVPN login page for Cisco Adaptive Security Appliance software. Cisco has noted a surge in attacks based on the vulnerability, a surge that led CISA to add the vulnerability to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. Now, it should be noted that a patch was issued for this vulnerability some time ago, but this is a good reminder for organizations to make sure that systems are patched and that patches are documented no matter how old the system or how historical the patch. Threat actors have long memories. Yours should be longer. Now, in malware news this week, a bit of nasty code is targeting users in China and Vietnam for now, but users everywhere should be aware of CleverSore because of its capabilities. This is a new malware installer that gets started by convincing users to install new software. Once installed, the malware enables keylogging, data theft, security circumvention, and stealthy system control for potential long-term espionage. It focuses on specific groups by checking the system's language and terminating without installing if the language is not Chinese or Vietnamese. Now, it's easy to get complacent about malware hitting users in another part of the world, but it's worth remembering that these linguistic, geographic, or other fencing mechanisms can be removed or changed in a moment's time. Finally, a new phishing campaign is using an intentionally corrupted Word file to deliver malware. The messages, which purport to be from payroll or human resources, include an intentionally corrupted Word document as an attachment. When the victim receives the corrupted file, they are then prompted and may use Microsoft's Word file recovery feature, which successfully repairs the file, activating the malware, which has now made it past security features. The phishing campaign also makes use of a QR code which takes victims to a malicious site designed to steal their login credentials and offer the threat actor another avenue into company resources. 'Tis the season to be very careful with attachments and to reinforce anti-phishing lessons for users at all levels of an organization. Well, that's it for this week. Please join us again next week for the CyberWatch podcast, brought to you by Access Point Consulting. And be sure to visit CyberWatch on LinkedIn and at www.accesspointconsulting.com, and follow us or subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. I'm Curtis Franklin. We'll see you next week.